everyone. Salut, bonjour tout le monde. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Nurau Talks. I'm Justin, neuroscientist and CEO of Nurau. We've developed a science-based solution that improves the employee experience with personalized AI-driven coaching for managers at all levels of an organization. We're working with leading retailers and hotels to help improve company performance, customer service, and all that by helping people manage people. That's what we do. And to celebrate the holiday season, our last LinkedIn Live of the year, we are here today with none other than Dr. Jim Harter, Chief Scientist at Gallup's Workplace Management Practice, one of the largest advisory firms in the world. I'm really thrilled by that. Dr. Harter is co-author of Wall Street Journal's bestseller, Wellbeing at Work, released in 2021. And the #1 Wall Street Journal and Washington Post bestseller, and my personal favorite, It's the Manager, released in 2019. He's also author of the first large-scale multi-organization study to investigate the relationships between employee engagements and business results, a study that covers nearly 3 million employees across 54 industries and 96 countries. So if there's anyone in the world that knows about the importance and the impact of managers, Jim is that person. So this is going to be a very interactive session. So if anyone has questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, write them down in the chat. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Hey, Justin. Thanks for having me on. Happy holidays, everybody. It's great to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for being with us today. Welcome to Nurau. It's the first time we meet face-to-face, so I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thanks for inviting me. Look forward to the discussion.
Our team was looking forward for this discussion for the past couple weeks, from our CTO to all the way down to our interns. Actually, everyone was so thrilled to have you because we've been reading your research, Gallup's articles and papers, and your books for multiple years, and we were so inspired by your research. It's kind of the basis of what we do here at Nurau, right? So we do AI-powered coaching to support managers at scale. So obviously we had a lot of questions for you. So we kind of tried to summarize all that. So we have a 20 to 30 minute conversation together. So I'll try to summarize and bring that all together. But before we start, I would love to better understand what brought you to work in this space. Was it a very, very bad manager? Like, what happened?
That's a good question. It actually wasn't. I sort of got lucky getting into this field. I knew growing up that I got some good feedback from some teachers that I was good at math and that I was a good writer, and I kind of took that to heart. I knew I liked studying people, but I didn't really know I'd end up in this field until I got an internship, which I'm a big fan of. It's a really great way to get game film on yourself and on other people before you start work in a given area. And that evolved into a guy named Don Clifton, many people have heard of, asked me if I wanted to partner with him on some research. And so I thought I better take up that opportunity, and did all my master's and Ph.D. work at the University of Nebraska while I was working full-time with him. So I thought probably the best way possible to learn, time-consuming, but applying while I was learning the content. And that was a great experience. So it wasn't really because of a bad manager. And Don's approach was to study success across a variety of jobs. And so that's led to a lot of discoveries over the years. And we partnered together for a long time, and I've had a chance to partner with a lot of people who've been great mentors over the years. 38 years now at Gallup.
38 years. Congratulations. And is Dr. Clifton still working at Gallup?
He passed in 2003. So when I started working with him, he was about my age, actually, maybe just a little bit older than me. So, and I'm just approaching 60 now. So, but his son Jim Clifton is our chairman,
okay,
and his grandson John Clifton is our CEO.
Very cool. So it's a family.
I've worked closely with all three of them. Yeah, Jim and I have co-authored 3 books together, and John and I work very closely as well on a number of projects.
Very cool. And So it's not a bad manager. It was actually very, very good managers. So studying,
Yeah.
as you said, what was
It's been kind of interesting though, Justin, because I get a chance to study a lot of organizations of all different types. And so you see that full range, and one of our discoveries early on was that you go into any organization for the first time and you get this massive range of engagement across teams, and you can attribute that back to the manager. And the goal then, of course, is to change that variance in over time and shift the organization's culture. So there's almost as many cultures as there are managers, and that was very surprising to a lot of people. And we published a lot on that topic. But so I've seen the full gamut. I've seen terrible managers, I've seen great managers, I've seen average managers, and there's different interventions you need for different types of managers and where they're at. But the reason for that range was very interesting to me because it had a lot to do with how people get into the job in the first place. They typically when you ask a manager how they got into their job, it's either they've been with the company a long time, or they're a really good individual contributor that just got promoted to manager because that seemed like the appropriate thing. Right. When it takes some really important people skills to be an effective manager, and what goes into that has a lot to do with what we teach managers, as and also how we select managers in the first place to be in that role.
Right. So one of the questions we had was, what are the most critical soft skills? You mentioned people skills, but what are the most critical soft skills you see managers lacking, independent of industry, or even like what are the type of situations that they are repeatedly undertrained or unprepared to handle?
It's amazing how much of what goes into great managing is cross-industry. That was another big discovery that we found through meta-analysis, that a lot of these factors are based in human nature and what people need when they come to work, no matter what type of work environment it is. And so if I was going to boil it down into three things that people need and managers need to get continuously better at. One is setting goals and priorities and involving people in doing that. So there's some low-hanging fruit in this to get it right. Ongoing conversations. We found that managers, if they're going to be effective nowadays, they need to have at least one meaningful conversation a week with each person. And we did some research to kind of dig into what that means. But think about it as an ongoing touch points and conversations so that you can be in touch with their work and what's going on in their work, right. And ideally in their work life continuum, so that you can get that right, get that. Managers are really in the only position to get to know each person's situation, and that's why the role is so important. A CEO can do that with their direct reports, but it's impossible for them in a large organization to get to know each person's situation. But managers can at all levels. And then the third is accountability. A lot of times we hear about soft skills and the importance of caring about people, but if we don't have accountability in the mix, people never really know how good they are. They might be successful, but they might have another coworker that's slacking, and if that coworker isn't held accountable, they feel like there's no fairness and equity in the environment, and so that's an important component of it as well. So, goal setting and priority setting, getting that right, ongoing conversations, and accountability are three areas that I see a lot of managers struggle with, but can be fixed quickly if we get them the right resources and the right shortcuts.
Yeah,
to get those things done.
Totally agree. And I think would you agree that managers have been on the front lines for the past 3 years or more, not only facing the pandemic, but this massive change in remote work, paradigm where people were in the office, now they're remote. So big workforce changes that happen, and managers were at the front lines of that. So other than those three components, what should managers be prepared for in the future? What is coming next, and how can managers be best prepared for that?
Well, the role of managing has never been more complex. And we're seeing, we call this the manager squeeze because they're hit from a lot of different directions. And we're seeing that managers now are struggling to get their jobs done. Primarily because we're not simplifying their roles and getting to the bare essentials like those three that I listed off. I've got a long list. Actually, I have it right here in front of me, a long list of the hard job of managing and everything that goes into it. And you could list off these long lists of what managers are responsible for, from evaluating team progress to gathering input to timesheets and pay and expenses to diversity, equity, inclusion, proactively communicating from senior executives. There's a long list of what managers are supposed to do. But
Right.
every one of those requirements becomes easier if managers are in touch with people on a daily basis. And it's never been more important when we have all this remote hybrid work going on where people aren't together all the time. And so managers need to be intentional. It doesn't mean that meaningful feedback only comes from managers, but they need to set the direction, and just taking 15 to 30 minutes a week to have kind of like the time we're spending here today, just that amount of time, you can learn a lot about what's going on in someone's work life, and make adjustments where you need to, or recognize them because
Yeah.
you know what's going on. You can't recognize them appropriately if you don't know what's going on in their work and know what they've accomplished with their team. You can't adjust to priorities if you don't know those things. You really need to know their strengths to do it right. Also, you have to know what their idiosyncrasies are and their natural strengths
Yeah.
to be able to do it effectively, and to put them in the right direction. So the role of manager doesn't have to be that complex, and we can improve it for people. Too often, Justin, we have separated performance management from employee engagement, from learning and development, and they can all be brought together. They don't have to be separate. Employee engagement, I mean, all these things can be brought together with a coherent approach to learning and education, where manager skills can be developed so that they're more effective. And that seemingly long list of requirements of being a manager doesn't seem quite so long, because it all gets easier when managers are in touch with people in a way that feels trusting and where there's a relationship there.
I love that, because it all boils down into having conversations, just a very basic thing to do, but a lot of managers don't think or don't reserve that time to speak with your direct reports. A lot of managers are also more introverts. So how do you manage that, where managers are not really comfortable having those types of conversations, and they're scared that the conversation might derail to more personal issues? How do we make sure in those conversations that we just keep talking about workplace related issues, and not become their psychiatrist or psychologist?
That's a really good point. We shouldn't expect managers to be necessarily life coaches, at least not to start off. And they got to get the work part right first. And some of those basic engagement elements, getting those right, starts to build trust. And if someone, a thing that's kind of overlooked in terms of feedback, and you mentioned introverts, extroverts, regardless of what your style is or what your strengths are, everybody can get better at listening. And a lot of these conversations aren't just me forcing a bunch of questions on you and initiating everything. A lot of it can start off with just listening. What's going on in your work life?
Yeah.
And listening to what's going on. How are you collaborating with your team? What's working best? What isn't? And just let people talk. And that can help a lot. So I think you can do it through your own strengths as a manager. You don't have to be a particular type of manager. We found that, from a selection standpoint, we can select people who are more prone to be effective managers. So there's science around that we've developed. But at the same time, most managers, with some exceptions, but most managers can be taught new skills where they can be even more effective, and where light bulbs start going off, and they figure out, with some, questions that we help them with, they can do a better job of listening and then responding to what they hear, and putting people in a better position to not only improve their, and I would not take the well-being side out of it. They can improve their work life, but then also they can improve their overall life if they do a good job of listening to what's going on, and couple that with what needs to get done at work.
Yeah, well, work takes such an important part of somebody's life, right? 8 hours a day is spent at work. So if you don't have that positive relationship with your manager, or you don't have those conversations, it's hard for all the other personal parts of your
Mm-hmm.
life, right? So it spills over for sure. We have
So,
a question in the comments here. It says, in your experience, what are the best ways to address training gaps when ICs transition to managerial roles?
well, again, we really boil it down. We start with the research, but one of the goals of our team is to take the complicated research and make it useful
Right.
for managers so they can actually apply it. And that's what I consider the most enjoyable, but also the most challenging part of the work that we do. And we put it in kind of a boss to coach framework where now maybe not everybody has thought about in the past that managers are bosses, but think about it from the traditional manager where it's more of a delegation style to
Yeah.
more of a coaching style of managers. And Justin, I know you're familiar with this. But we put it in that framework where you start with the basics of what does it take to engage an employee? What are your strengths individually? If you start with the strengths of the manager, they start as an individual contributor, you start with their strengths, they can learn that they can manage in a way that's very unique to them and partner with other people that have other strengths to fill some of the gaps. So initially, they need to know how they can engage people. We've got 12 elements we found. We found 4 other ones that have been particularly important since the pandemic hit, related to DEI, well-being. We talked about that a little bit. How you serve the customer effectively, and feedback, like we talked about. We need to know how well we're giving feedback, but we got to start off with some learning curriculum that's simple but based in science, that's strengths-based, engagement-focused, and performance management related. Many people have a performance management program that's completely separate from engagement. It should be integrated in. It should be part of the same package, actually. And then the other part of it is once they learn some of that foundational knowledge, it's important that they have some experiences that they actually practice. And so it's more like a journey where they practice having conversations. They come back, they share some of what they learned with their peers. So it's an ongoing kind of learning process where it's not just an event. You go to this training event and then you're done, and you're on your own. It's more of a continuous learning process that's foundationally in based knowledge around those 3 things: strengths, engagement, and performance management.
Right.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we get a lot of clients telling us we do training, it goes in one ear, it comes out on the other
Right.
side, right? So how do we make sure it sticks to with somebody? And I think what you said, which is bringing it to their reality, making it not just a class but an ongoing conversation, could make these types of these concepts stick.
It sticks when people see that it works, and the only way to see that it works is to practice. So we give them guides, we give them examples of questions to starters, so they can start having some of these conversations. If you think about someone, let's say, take it to the next level, someone who's maybe been managing someone for 5 years and has never had a weekly conversation with them, that could seem pretty awkward. But it becomes unawkward if you start by knowing the person's strengths and you share yours with them. When you do that sort of thing, it does create some trust, and it helps the manager and employee know that, here's who I am in a different language, and this might explain why I do some of the things that I do. But it also allows each person to kind of leverage their own strengths as you're developing, as you're aiming them at performance, at high performance,
So
and customer outcomes.
Yeah, and when you talk about strengths, you talk about the famous Clifton Strength Assessment, I imagine?
That's the one that we've spent a lot of time developing. Over 30 million people have been through it. It's
Population of
Canada. It's most groups I go into, you get a lot of hands go up when you bring it up. So a lot of people are familiar with it. The key to it is, though, it isn't a beginning and end itself. It's actually a beginning that leads to when I asked Don Clifton why we were developing this strengths tool, he said it's to create more meaningful conversations.
Wow.
It's really to improve conversations, and so if you think about it that way, it just makes us more efficient. I think about it as it's a shortcut to getting to know someone. Think about it in a DEI lens. There's a concept in academia called interpersonal congruence. And the research has shown that when people can quickly have congruence with somebody else, get to know someone very quickly, they have higher performance in diverse teams than they would have otherwise in a non-diverse team.
Right.
And so shortening that distance between people is really important. And Strengths is one of the tools Clifton Strengths, one of the tools that's been shown to be effective in doing that, bridging that gap.
No, it's so important. Where do you see, what's the next assessment coming out? Like where's the innovation in the next couple of years at Gallup or for your team? What are the focuses?
I think the innovations are more in how you combine this knowledge across. We know a lot about what matters. We've got to keep learning more and more about how we integrate like strengths into engagement even more effectively, and AI is an important part of that. Strengths into well-being. We wrote that book you referenced, Wellbeing at Work, where we integrated some of our strengths knowledge into how people can approach well-being in their own individual way, and how I can approach my work in my own individual way. So I think a lot of it has to do with how we aim strengths at other things like performance management, how we do that more effectively. We've got a number of large organizations that are becoming really effective at that. But I think AI can speed up some of that and can keep increasing our knowledge around what's most effective. So I think in the right context, it can speed things up. But we're always developing new questions and new assessments. We developed a set around ESG recently, around the human part of ESG. So that's been a topic that's come up quite a bit. We've got our well-being metrics, and so there's always something on the horizon.
Right. And so how do you see the link? You mentioned well-being, we mentioned engagement. What is the link between, you think, managers and well-being? And how do you quantify that?
You think about approaching well-being, there's a couple of different angles. One is what you provide as resources to employees kind of from a distance in terms of the benefits and packages and those kinds of things that are available to them. That's one. And I would encourage people to align those resources with 5 elements that we found are important to people across the world: your career, your social well-being, your financial well-being, your physical well-being, and your community well-being. So you can offer, benefits and resources in those areas, but people start connecting themselves to those more frequently if they've got the right kind of conversations with their managers. So first you build trust through the manager-employee relationship, but then you can go to the next level and people will start, initiating conversations about, bridging that gap between work and the rest of their life. So that's more effective. And organizations, a manager can direct someone to a financial resource inside the company that can make their life easier, help them manage, reduce stress, and increase long-term security. Or they can direct them to maybe there's a team of people that have a common community mission that they're working on, and they know that about the person, so they can help them connect them to a colleague that might have the same mission or purpose around the community, and help them with that. Or there might be a community activity, or there could be 2 people that have 2 things in common that they connect socially. So you can kind of see how those well-being elements can be influenced by the manager just by knowing something about the person that they're managing, and they can then initiate, here's an opportunity that you might look into, and that shows that you've got an authentic, interest in the individual, and that's what caring about the individual's well-being is all about.
No, I love that point, because with our coach, we also help the manager understand the different initiatives that the company has, because a lot of managers don't know that they have an employee assistance program or they have financial help or something like that. So it's important for the manager to be able to reference these tools that exist for their employees, and that demonstrates a little bit that they care, that they understand what they're going through, and this is what the company offers. So managers are that central point of the equation. What do you think is the biggest surprise in your 38 years at Gallup? What did you discover that was for you the most amazing revelation for me. Well, just reading your book, it was that 70% of the variance in employee engagement was determined by the manager. For me, that was huge. How about yourself? What was the big something that stood out over the years?
A big turning point in terms of learning was that the variance that exists at the manager level within organizations. A lot of people before that, and when we started sharing it, it got a lot of press because nobody had really found that before. But that then leads to the 70. So first you identify that there's all this variance that exists on not only employee engagement, also all the outcomes like retention rates and profitability, productivity, how customers are being served. You go into any organization for the first time and there's all this, and executives hate that kind of variance because it means we don't have a predictable environment. But you can solve for it if you channel things and keep developing and channel things through the managers. So the manager explains about 70% of the variance in team engagement, which then links to all those other outcomes. So it's very solvable. But the reason that organizations have had a tough time moving the numbers over time is that they've thought they had to do it at an organizational level by treating everybody kind of the same. And if you flow all the interventions through, not all, but a lot of the interventions through manager-led teams and develop those managers so that they can be more effective, you start shifting that distribution. This bell-shaped distribution starts moving over, and you've got a surplus of effective managers, and you've got much better outcomes. And when things like recessions hit or pandemics hit, you're more resilient because your people are looking out for your best interests. And that resiliency component, I think, can't be overlooked. And we've people also asked us about the social aspect of engagement. Is that less important when people are more separated as they are now? So we looked into it. We were open-minded about it, and we found that having social relationships at work is even more important now than ever. Why is it that? Well, it's probably because we are separated, and human nature doesn't leave us just because we're separated, right? People have been dependent on one another since we existed, and that doesn't just suddenly leave us because the style of working has changed. So we have to lean into some things even more when times change. But the same human nature elements, that surprised me too, Justin, is that I used to think you'd have to develop the same or a different instrument for every organization. And we found through meta-analysis that there's some common elements that work effectively across different organizations. And that's surprisingly allowed us to learn a lot more. We had a more focused set of items. We learned a ton more because we could dig really deep into each one of those areas and see what the best managers do in each area.
Right. Because even on our side, we're looking at different industries, and management challenges. The top three boil down to people issues and people related issues. So there's a lot of stuff in common throughout different industries. So
yeah, and there's a lot of low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
That it isn't like a huge thing to solve for. Think about recognition. We worked with a company called Work Human, and we found that 1 in 10 people are asked how they like to be recognized.
Really?
1 in 10. And it's not that hard to do. It's like goal setting. How many people really involve people in setting their own goals? It's easy to do, but very few people do it. And that gets you a long ways just doing those two things. But how about deciding where you work in this remote environment? How do people decide? Well, most people are either told where to be, or they just decide on their own. Very few people, only 12%, actually work it out with their team. And that's the one that relates most highly to engagement. So just sitting down with your team and saying, when are we going to be together? When is it most useful for us to be together? And what do we get the most out of in-person time? And we all know that's important. But we also learned some autonomy. So I think organizations have to honor both those things.
Yeah, we honor autonomy at the manager level as well. You want to make sure that managers are having conversations with your employees. You want to, it's all low-hanging fruit, but the question is, do you find it difficult to train on these topics? Large organizations versus medium to small size organizations, because large size organizations have a lot of processes, can have a lot of resources to devote to training their managers or training programs. What happens with small and medium organizations who are the bedrock of the American economy? How do we get that message to them?
Well, I think it's actually we have a lot of organizations we work with that are very small to medium sized, and it's actually sometimes easier with them because they don't have pre-existing curriculum, and you can slot in what we've proven works. We've done meta-analyses of the curriculum over time and seen that it reduces turnover, increases engagement. In larger organizations, it can work just as effectively, but a lot of times we have to work to integrate the curriculum with existing curriculum, and that's fine. I think organizations need their own unique touch on it, and you've got to roll it out, right? You've got to roll it out in a systematic way so that all the managers can have access to it. So it's just but we've worked with so many large organizations that we've seen just as much growth, even more in many cases, in the large organizations, because we've worked with mapping them out, and you've got to do the hard work of mapping out the manager-led teams, getting the data into their hands, making sure that you've got a protocol for how you upskill all of them so they have the right knowledge about and practice about how to do it. But the smaller ones are sometimes quicker to adopt because it's smaller and it's more achievable in the short term, but it's achievable for all of them.
I love
It's a matter of planning it out.
So good management is within everyone's reach, right? Small, medium, large. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, as you said, that organizations can capture. And already, 30 minutes went by, Jim. That was
quick.
It was really quick. I'm looking at the time and I can't believe it. We have so much more to talk about. But if we end today, I would love to end on a personal experience that you had as a manager. Was there something that happened to you that you feel you weren't prepared for as chief scientist of Gallup? Was there something that you feel you could have been better prepared for, and how did you overcome that?
Well, to be really frank with you, I partner with a lady named Emily Meyer, who we've got a team of researchers and another guy named Ed O'Boyle. We all work together, but Emily does a lot of the day-to-day. She takes care of people's pay, takes care of their, make sure they get feedback on their projects. My job is to mentor them. My job is to lead our research. And so I think what you learn over time is where you need to spend your time to have the biggest benefit, and not only on the organization that you're with, but also what's most fulfilling for you as an individual. And what's fulfilling for me is working with people on projects, mentoring them, and accomplishing research with them. What Emily gets a kick out of is organizing our team, making sure everybody's getting the right recognition. I do that too, but she works with all of their administrative things as well. Right. And what I learned is that over time, if you're working in the right organization, you can continually fine tune your job to do what you do best. And that's what's worked out for me. I've found all kinds of people that love to do things that I might not do best, or at least allow me to do the things that progress our organization and other organizations that we're working with in the quickest way possible, and to get the information out in the quickest way possible, because we all have limited time. We might work a lot of hours, but we've got limited time. And the key is to focus on what you do best. And what I've enjoyed doing best is working on the research with the team, mentoring them. And we have a lot of we're talking about before the show, a lot of new interns every year coming in. And they're incredibly smart, take on hard projects, and grow very quickly. And that's what's most fulfilling for me. And seeing the impact with clients is, of course, the most fulfilling part of it. The best recognition we get is somebody took some of our research and applied it and said this was really useful to us.
Wow. Well, I love that. I think, making sure that's something that comes up often is managers never have time, right? So knowing where to prioritize your energy. And do we agree that managers should make sure that they take that 10 minutes, 15 minutes to have a weekly conversation with their direct reports at all levels of an organization?
I think that's the one. If you're going to think about one requirement of managing that everybody needs to get right, it'd be that, 15 to 30 minutes, whatever you can individualize it as well, but make sure the conversation every week is meaningful. And that starts with, the person and what's meaningful to them. But the patterns we've seen in meaningful conversations are recognition, goals and priorities, collaboration, some emphasis on the individual's strengths, and of course that work-life continuum and how that works most effectively. But that goals and priorities one is really important because people need to know they're making progress. They need to know how their work is contributing to the bigger purpose of the organization.
Right. Make sure they're connected with the purpose of their job. Right.
Right. And that's where recognition comes in as well.
Right. Very cool. Well, Jim, it was a real pleasure to have you. Hopefully you come back for another session. I have like 3 pages of questions I would want to ask you. We have our CTO who thanks you for paving the way in this type of research, because we're a research-based organization as well. We're all neuroscientists or expert coaches or people who are very scientists at heart. So what you do in paving the way to bring that research and making it accessible is so amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for all the work you're doing, Justin. I really appreciate you having me on, and glad to follow up with any questions anybody has afterwards as well.
Awesome. So thank you everyone who joined us. Happy holidays. Be safe and see you next year already, 2024.